their lives in a dreadful tragedy. And please, before we start, can you just make sure your phones are off, your computers are also on silent. Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? No. And are there any declarations of interest? And previous meetings, when I signed the minutes as a true and accurate record of everything out on this vision. Yes?
Yes.
Great. So we come to the first item of our meeting today, which is the Grenfell Tower design. And I wonder whether Joe and Sam just became before I ask them to introduce the report, I would just like to say a few words. I think the publication of the inquiry was a hugely significant moment for the council, but I think we should all remember that its significance is absolutely nothing. It pales into nothing compared to the importance for families who lost loved ones. And certainly having been at the inquiry and a testimony, the unimaginable suffering of the bereaved survivors and wider communities. Well, really, it was just an incredible moment. So I should say welcome to people coming in now. You're very welcome. This council failed to keep its residents. It failed its residents completely before the fire, on the night of the fire, and in the aftermath of the fire. And we failed to keep people safe, and we failed to listen to what they were telling us. We were warned and we ignored it, and we didn't listen. And the inquiry lays bare these failings for all to see. And I'd just like to say that I accept all the findings and I'm deeply sorry for all our failings. Now, the bereaved and survivors and the wider community have had to wait a long time for answers. And I hope that the publication of this report is an important step in the ongoing search for justice. We fully accept the findings, which are absolutely, they're a withering critique of a system which is really broken from top to bottom. Grenfell was wholly avoidable, and there was failure at every single level. And I just want to say that this council will learn from this report. It will learn from every single criticism. And we will take time over the next few months to reflect on what it does mean for us. We will listen to what our communities tell us, and we will publish a full and formal response later this autumn. And I think it's fair to say we cannot undo the harm we've done, but we owe it to families, neighbours, communities to ensure that this report drives everlasting change in this council. So, Joe, Sam?
I'm happy to just to briefly introduce this report.
Thank you.
So this report is entitled Implications for the Council, and it takes the Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 2 report, which amounts to 1,700 pages of findings across 14 different parts, many of which are nothing to do with the council. This focuses specifically on the areas of relevance to the council, and that is in 4 main areas. The first is the first in order, I wish to be clear, is the TMO in relationship with the council. It's followed by the TMO's management of fire, the TMO and the council's management of fire safety at Grenfell Tower, the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower, and in particular the role of the council's building control service, and finally the aftermath and response. We've sought to summarise the findings of the inquiry here, pick out the ones that are most relevant to the council in terms of looking to the future, in terms of thinking about what changes have been made in the past 7 years and what further changes may be needed. We then set out towards the end of the report what's going to happen next in preparation for council's full response. And Joe could say a little about the community engagement programme we're putting together. But I would draw everybody's attention to paragraph 9.1, which is 10 questions that I think with those working on the response feel we need to answer in developing a formal response. It's the questions we want to ask elected members of the council and the community. Joe, do you want to say a bit about the community engagement programme, which is quite extensive?
Thanks, Sam. And just to emphasise, the inquiry report finds very clearly that both the council and the TMO failed to listen to its residents and failed to act on what it heard. And I think our approach to this, developing our inquiry response, needs to bear that in mind at all times. And so our engagement with the community is really about listening to people's response to the report and understanding what they want to see from the council in this next phase. We've had a number of drop-ins already, and we've got more planned, both specifically for bereavement survivors and for people in the local community. We've got public meetings coming up at the beginning of October. We've also added a meeting, which I think isn't in this paper, which is specifically in Nottingdale, and that's in response to some really helpful feedback from the community that said they wanted to see something specifically in that area and not slightly further afield, which is where the other meetings were. And we've also we've had 4 drop-ins in the diary so far, but we've got plans to do more further down the line. We've had really good attendance at both of the drop-ins we've held so far in 2 very different parts of the borough, which has been really encouraging to see. But the spirit of this engagement, the spirit of our approach to this is really to be clear in this report about where we feel, where the inquiry report finds clearly that the council made mistakes, and then to talk to the community openly about what that means, both for the changes we've already made and for the changes we have yet to make.
And finally, I'll just say that where the decision we're asking you to make tonight is simply to receive the report and consider it. There will be further opportunities for the whole council to participate at full council on the 9th of October. There'll be a debate. There'll be public speaking opportunities that are specifically tailored for, specifically been offered to the Grenfell community. There will then be a debate, the whole council, on this report, but also the full inquiry report. And we will come back to this meeting in the middle of November with a draft of the council's final response.
In the spirit of listening to the community, as we have members of the community here, would they like to speak, or do they have any comments before we discuss this? Right. Oh, who's talking here? Sammy. Oh, Sammy, sorry, I can't see you behind this.
Obviously, hearing and reading this is not easy read for us, and I know it's not easy read for you. So before I make my comment, I just want to put on record that we know there are officers within this council who get it, who work hard, But 7 years on, it seems that from the top, it's not, the top part of the council is not really aligned with that. I came today because I was shocked to hear an individual who came to the overview committee last week who said that the local community is colonized, who said residents associations, all they're here to do is whole Christmas parties. Kim and Elizabeth, you remember when we reached out to you in the aftermath, you saw us as human beings how shocked, how traumatized we were. I think the last 7 years, we've done nothing but engage with you.
Mhm.
I know that Residents Association in Nottingham wants a medal, but to this day, we work so hard. So I think in terms of your engagement, you need to also side with your residents associations. You know, to date, when we send an email, we have to send an email 3 times before we get a response. So I'm here to say that we want some respect. If you don't agree with us, just write back to us and say you don't agree with us. But I think we should recognize that at the very least, those residents association in Nottingham did more than what they're supposed to be doing, and they continue to do that. And I spoke to you, Joe, in terms of, we know that there's loads of people who want to speak to you. There's loads of people who wants to be the game changer, and you can hear them. But I think we need an engagement plan that you're quite clear in terms of the way we give to residents associations. We are not all the same.
Okay, that's very
Thank you.
helpful. I think we've noted that. Thank you. The gentleman next to Samir.
Hi.
Hi.
One brief comment about what Wade says about you're in good spirit of engaging with the residents. And I've seen it down the years. There is engagement, but there is no actual work. There is engagement. We're not listening. I'll say it very like straightforward, because I've seen it and I've been in the meetings then a few years, and after that I just withdraw from the meeting because nobody is listening, especially TMO. I was a leaseholder and TMO. There was no response from TMO whatsoever. Whatever you do, you're just talking to, I don't know. This is one of those things. I'm not sure it's a good spirit. I need that spirit to be attached to all associations as well, like Samir said, because I know some of them they're detached from, nobody listened to them. And I want them to be all together in one room, all association with you guys. Then we discuss exactly what's the plan for future and engagement of association. That's my opinion.
Thank you. If I could just respond to that.
Yes.
Thank you very much for sharing that feedback.
I'm from Granford Walk, actually.
Also, okay,
And
thank you.
I lived there for 29 years before the aftermath. And I'll tell you something, one tiny bit, it's not me. I find out that my name doesn't even exist on the lease, on the deed. It's unbelievable.
Thank you for sharing that feedback. I think I'm sorry to say that's not the first time that I've heard that people, and I think we referred to it in the report, that it will take that there is a lack of trust that when people are express themselves, and that when we create spaces for engagement, that they will be listened to and that will be acted on. I hope that's a commitment that in relation to this work we can make, and that in these 2 phases of meetings, we're very happy alongside these public meetings to meet with individual residents associations, to bring people together to meet in whatever way is most comfortable for you. I think what we want to do is collect that feedback and then show you in that second series of meetings how we plan to act on it, because I agree, but I also think we need to recognise that is we are asking the community to make a commitment and to some extent to make a leap of faith, because they do have experience both under the TMO and the council in the past of not being listened to or of not having their concerns acted on. So I recognise that we're operating against that background of low trust. I just want to assure you that we want to do whatever we can to make sure that we engage effectively and act on what we hear.
Can I just make one quick?
Sorry, can I possibly ask the lady behind you?
Yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate what these guys were saying. I think it's ridiculous that 7 years later we're sitting down here and asking you guys for action. Like, we're tired of these same emails, and for you guys to just tick a box to say, oh, we communicated with the community. Coming from Granford Walk, for example, you guys have done nothing to help us we're, you labeled us into one category, and when it suits you guys, sorry. I think it's just ridiculous that we're still sitting here today talking about action. I was 12 years old, I'm now 19, and I had to sit in these meetings telling you guys how to behave. Elizabeth Campbell, after the inquiry came out, you said that you guys have changed. How have you changed? We are sitting in the same meetings with the same people saying the same things. I was coming to meetings with my mum when I was 12. I'm now 19 years old saying the same thing that she used to say. I think it's ridiculous that as Grenfell Walk, who were permanently evacuated from their properties, who did not have a choice whether we could go back or not, you guys put us in this position and we're having to sit down and fight for something that's so basic. You guys to treat us with a tiny bit of respect. I think what everyone is forgetting is that the council work for us. We do not work for you guys, right? Your position is to work for us and accommodate to our needs, and you guys have not done that. No one in this room I can say has done that. You guys need to take accountability and not sit down when people filmed you and go on these private do these private statements saying, oh, we've changed. You guys have not changed. You guys have not changed. I'm not seeing any action. I do not need to sit here and tell you guys 7 years later how to change and what to do. It's clear from the start what you guys had to do. You guys all know what you have to do to change, but you're choosing not to.
Joe, I mean, I think that's very heartfelt, and I guess that's what we're trying to do over the next consultation meetings, is to take people's contact, as you've said, and then say, well, these are areas where we think we have changed, and where do you think there's more change to come? But equally, I accept that Grenfell Walk, I think this is when I say special case, I don't mean special in a way that it's to one side, but I mean it's something that we need to address your concerns, and we need to show you why we have come to some decisions, whether we could have made other decisions, whether, and what the future holds as well.
And also to include us in those decisions, because from the beginning, we've just felt like you guys have made decisions for us. You haven't consulted us. A lot of people from Grenfell Walk are not here today speaking up because they've had enough of being ignored. It's the same thing. The reason that Grenfell happened was because you ignored the residents. You're continuing to do the same thing.
I don't know the details of consultation with Grenfell Walk, but I'm taking on board what you said, and I've just said to Joe, we need to look at Grenfell Walk as a particular piece of consultation that we need to do to figure out, what we've done in the past. Was it correct? What people feel? Have we changed? What future things are possible? What's not possible?
I'm going to take on from what you just said about not being special. Seems that I don't have to put this into words, but you've never really noticed Grenfell Walk. You really never took on anything what Grenfell Walk have come to. And it's only come to light now from the last meeting when we had with the council that you guys, I'm taking it and now understand what Grenfell Walk have been through. That's quite disappointing because been 7 years on. We had to come here to explain this, and this is why we've come today to tell you that it's continuing and we need you to look after Grenfell Walk residents because they're all over the place. We don't know if we're coming or going, we're being labelled, and I've had enough of this labelling. I'm a human being and we've been through trauma and we just want support. That's all we're asking for.
Thank you.
The final,
Sammy?
I think, like you just said, look, we're not going to come here. We're not here today to tell you what you need to do. I think you have heard us for the last 7 years. It's really good. We're here today to give you an opportunity to write some of the wrongs of the last 7 years, those divisions, putting us in categories. And in particular with Nottingham, the immediate community, we've always worked together, and we want you need to be decisive and just be clear as to who's the immediate community. I had meetings with the job like was that right? We've put all the areas out together in Nottingham, so we've reached a commitment that you recognize this immediate community. We shouldn't have to say, look, we're an immediate community, and we don't want people who are, who want to jump on the bandwagon. So it's really for you to work in a different way, to recognize who this immediate community is and engage in a way that gives a voice to this community, but I'm here to say that all of us are in Nottingdale. We work together, so it might be that the local meetings in Nottingdale needs to be restored. So all the RAs can locally work together and then engage with you in a way that is constructive.
Yes, Kim.
I was just going to thank you, Sari, and thank you for your comments. I was just going to respond to you because obviously it was my brief at the beginning in terms of allocation of homes as a result of Grenfell. And I think the one thing that comes from what you said is that it is incredibly unfair to lots of different categories of people. The approach that we had, and I think in the beginning we made the mistake of using letters to categorize people, which I think was completely wrong. But we had a category A, those were included you, but you had subcategories within difference between yourselves on the walkway and those in the tower, and whether or not those in the tower were bereaved or survivors. Then you had people on Lancaster West Estate, some people who lived in the 300s, very close to where you lived. And within the walkways themselves, there was a lot of difference in terms of the way people were treated. People who decided to go into a hotel, that gave them access to alternative homes. Those people that stuck it out with no electricity and water ended up not having that opportunity as well. And then when you start looking further afield to places like Silchester, who are not part of the Nottingdale estate, are not part of the refurbishment programme, where we've given a commitment to do that, they are facing completely different situations. So I think what I would say is I very much appreciate what you're saying and that feeling of being injustice and being treated in a different way. But I wanted to stress that that's something which is very true of North Kensington and Nottingdale because of the way that we approached the aftermath of the fire. But thank you for speaking.
And I think, if I'm correct, with the future Grenfell support, there are things in that you felt that hadn't been laid, even though we've had quite a lot of consultation. And I know that you brought that up.
Not with Grenfell Walk. We haven't had consultations with Grenfell Walk. Are you referring to the RJ now?
Yes.
Yeah. So with Grenfell Walk, again, we've been labelled something different by the council without even informing us. So 1 minute we're called survivors and 1 minute we're not. It's disgusting how that's come out, and no one's even addressed that to us. You just all of a sudden come out 1 meeting. Oh, by the way, you're no longer called survivors. That's fine. I don't want to call a survivor. I don't want to call it bereaved. I don't want to call it a resident. I want to be called a human, like I said. That's all I'm saying to you. I've had enough of this labelling and doing things behind our back without talking to us. Come and talk to us, and we'll talk to you. We're contacted. All three of you. You will know me. I've spoken to all of your faces. You know my email address. Furthermore, you know where I live. Why can you not come to us and talk to us? I'm a vice chair of Grenfell Walk. 7 years on, I'm still fighting. This is just ridiculous. And it's not getting any easier. Forget about trying to deal with our trauma. We're trying to deal with it everyday life. And it's so difficult, juggling a family and dealing with what we're dealing with. Just labelling needs to stop, and you need to come and talk to us. RJ, it's completely disgusting how they've come to an agreement on how they've put us. I don't even know how to say this. Claire, please help me.
In the future Grenfell support for bereaved and survivors, of which Grenfell Walk is obviously part, the final model after phase 4 of the consultation has different levels of support available for different categories of people, which I think was arrived at through consultation.
Yes.
But what we see at the end of that is at the very bottom row. Who is at the bottom row in terms of the level of support that will be available going forwards? And I think the optics of that are very hurtful. The way that's come about, I think, is very difficult. And I think it looks, certainly to me, and I think it's felt by the residents as being very unfair. And I think as we are a council that is wanted to be a fairer council, That's why I wrote to all the members of the leadership team to bring that issue to your attention and to look at what things can be done at this stage going forward to make that more fair.
Just to say, thanks, Claire, and thank you.
And can I say, once we, because this is a slightly separate issue to the inquiry report. So if I let Jo respond, then we probably need to come back to actually the papers in front of us. But as you're here and Claire has voiced it, so
Yeah, I just
eloquently, I think it'd be good for Jo to respond.
just
Thank
wanted
you.
to touch on that. So, thanks, Hannah, and thank you for everybody for sharing your views and your concerns. So, there is one specific issue around the place of Grenfell Walk in the future support model. Callum's not here tonight, but I think we're hearing that we need to get a response over which sets out and a meeting which addresses some of those issues. I just wanted to assure you that for the engagement on the inquiry, we have one set of meetings which are for bereavement survivors, residents of Grenfell Walk very much included, but obviously you are free to attend any of the meetings in the community as well. We're not making those distinctions for the purposes of those public meetings. What we have done in response to your helpful feedback is make sure there is a meeting which is specifically for people who live in the immediate local community. I don't think we're going to sort of control for addresses, but what we will do is make sure that the communications go to people who live in that local area, because we recognise, to Samia's point, that there is a unique experience from people in that immediate local community, and on top of that, a unique experience that people from Grenfell Walk had. So just for the purpose, I know there is an issue about the future Grenfell support programme, but for the purposes of this engagement, we're not making those distinctions or making a hierarchy.
So going forward, just if you're going to do meetings, can we just get one specifically for Grenfell Walk, just because Grenfell Walk don't feel comfortable going, because they don't know where they're coming or going. They don't fit in this category.
We can certainly do a specific meeting for Grenfell Walk about the inquiry. There's no problem at all. I'll write it.
But thank you for coming. You'll take that way.
I think, Hannah, we've got a meeting in the diary. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, the findings have been called. The council's response, the consultation meetings, are there any comments? Mary, Mary, do you want to come first before I ask the others? Yeah, I think that might make more sense.
And do you want to talk about the housing? No, you go for. So there are two reports with comments. One is from the housing committee, and I think Claire wants to talk to that, which actually refers back to some of the things we've been talking about, and then I'll talk about the main OSC.
Okay, Claire, why don't you go first?
That's what you've just gotten.
First of all, the subject of categorisations and language, how words matter. I just want to reiterate again the phrase wider community over 7 years has caused a lot of pain to a lot of people. Here you mentioned Silchester. Actually, what happened was anyone who wasn't in category A or B, which is the whole rest of Nottingdale and beyond, was not even figuring anywhere that their pain and trauma was not even acknowledged for a long time. So I just want to just make that comment about the phrase wider community, that it is a painful one. And I think we now have the language that we can talk about Nottingdale, we can talk about the immediate community, we can talk about the Grenfell community, and it's a much more inclusive way to talk about it. But to move on to the recommendations from the Housing and Community Select Committee, you can see this is one of the additional papers. It's one page 3 to 4. And you can see that the first recommendation there is to make sure that Grenfell Walk residents are acknowledged and actively included in the engagement process. And it sounds like that we need to have a specific engagement for Grenfell Walk around that report. Since that committee took place and since these recommendations have been written, I've met separately with the residents of Grenfell Walk and heard more about the experience that they've been through and the concerns that they have, which I know Councillor Bay will go to the meeting shortly. But what's remaining is around the future Grenfell support. And I think that's the injustice of that and the unfairness of how it looks. not recognising the sensitivities. I think anyone could have seen, perhaps, or seen that putting anybody who's affected by Grenfell in whatever way, putting anybody at the bottom of the list of priorities sends quite a hurtful message, because everybody's pain is unique to them, and some people's pain and suffering has been extremely significant. So I'm hoping to have a meeting with Callum and perhaps the lead member to discuss with the residents what can be done, given that this has already been agreed by leadership, and I hope that there can be some flexibility or some creative ideas put forward. So that is that one. The other recommendations are about ensuring communications clear and inclusive, and that the language is accurate. Again, that speaks to the wider community. And also to be clear about the purpose of the two sets of meetings. So we have in the paper here, appendix section 11, the report itself, and at point 9, I think it was, the lines of inquiry. I think this paper, and particularly those points, for the class, it would be really useful to be able to have feedback from residents on, because while residents may have read the executive summary, I think it's really beneficial to have the summary of the detailed summary of the findings relating to the council, and also what the council's position is and what sorts of questions they want to be looking at. And it does say, are these comprehensive? Do we need to be looking at something more or different? And I think it would be really beneficial to have resident input on that to drive that forward. 2.4, we have a commitment that the engagement is flexible enough, which I think we can see from the Grenfell Partnerships team that it looks like it is. It already is. There's already been feedback around the public meetings being in Nottingdale, and that's already being accommodated. So I'm pleased to see that. And 2.5 and 2.6 sort of go a little bit together. It's a commitment that the leadership team will recognise and act on the engagement of residents, both in the written response and also going forwards in terms of change at the council. And I think this is a really, really crucial one. The report mentions the Hillsborough Charter, which was adopted unanimously by the council in December 2017. Now, I don't know if any of the leadership team remember what motion came next at that full council meeting, but I can remind you, if you don't. It was Councillor Blakeman's motion about the Grenfell creche, and she was making the point then in 2017 that 6 months is a long time in the life of a child. And we could see also 7 years is a long time in the life of a young person. And at that meeting, at which I was present, the lead member's response to that motion, rejecting that motion essentially, was very distressing. And especially coming so quickly, immediately after the adoption of the Hillsborough Charter. So I can see why residents would have a certain degree of healthy scepticism, to put it, if I could put it like that. What change is actually going to happen? Because we have heard many times over 7 years how much change there's been, and residents aren't feeling it. So we need to know what's going to happen, so that residents do see and feel that change and have that confidence. And it speaks to that leap of faith again. One thing I would be curious to know just is the outcome of the staff briefings and drop-ins, as the report details the engagement with the community, but I know there have been some staff engagement as well. I know there was one this afternoon, and I think it would be useful to maybe hear what those have yielded in terms of feedback. I think that covers pretty much those recommendations, and I'm pleased to see that some of them already appear to be implemented, so being implemented.
So I think it's up to us to note those recommendations. And Maxine, would you like to just fill Claire in now about the staff conferences, which Kim and I actually went to as well, very helpful.
So we've had a few opportunities for staff drop-ins to come talk about the inquiry report. On Monday this week, we held a staff event in the Great Hall, which we had a lot of staff come to, and there was a copy of the implications report on the table. And I expect people who work here to be familiar with what's in there and understand it. And the sessions were about reflecting on, people were describing about how they felt reading the report, and then it also was asking everyone to reflect on, in their own work, that of their team and their own individual work, what changes have come about. And obviously some staff have been here a matter of months, and some staff a matter of many years. So we're asking people to reflect on what changes have you brought about, and what more needs to happen. And we've got summaries from that which we'll pull together as part of the full response, and we can certainly make the outcome of that available to all councillors.
Fantastic, thank you very much. If I could just quickly, before we move on, just remind people why we need to see actions follow from words. In 2017, the motion for the Hillsborough Charter said, "This council pledges to care for our residents who are bereaved, injured or otherwise affected by the Grenfell Tower tragedy as comprehensively and sensitively as possible, learning the lessons both from the Hillsborough report and from our own recent experience." And I just hope that this will be applied to the residents of Grenfell Walk, in particular, who are coming tonight. Thank you.
Mary? Thank you very much. Well, we had, our committee had the report sort of 24 hours before our meeting, but I want to thank officers for making that possible, even though it was a rush for the committee to read it. I think it was really important that we had the chance to have an input at this stage into the response. And because Fast Grenfell is a huge priority in our deliberations. And if we didn't get a chance now, we'd have had to wait really till the council meeting. So I do appreciate that. I think our deliberations on the report fell into two categories. One was seeking assurance, again, about some of the things that had gone wrong and that they were now being put right and being kept put right, things like building control. And so that was an important part of our deliberations and will be an important part of scrutiny as we go forward as well. Then I think we made about 4 recommendations for what we thought ought to be included in the response, sort of sticking to exactly what we're talking about here. And I think the main one was the importance, again, echoing what residents have said about culture change, really proving that we've had a culture change and embedding it. Also about defining what accountability means for residents and including the wider considerations, which weren't necessarily in the report's recommendations, but around racial and social injustice, and thinking about those things, even though they aren't strictly speaking in the inquiry's recommendations. They're clearly something that matters to residents and is of importance to our cultural revival, really. And then there were also concerns or wishes expressed around the consultation, including the time schedules for resident feedback. And that's something that's going to be included in the Housing Communities Work Programme anyway. But there's a lot of talk about how often we do a lot of consultation and then the very last bit, when it really, really matters, somehow gets rushed, and how it's really important to avoid doing that. And then I think our final approach was just a more general one, really, about data, because it was something that did come up a lot in the report about how we didn't have the right data when we needed it in an emergency, but also as a thread running through what we do, being a more data-driven organisation. In scrutiny, we're trying to develop performance reports, but it's also useful to know what lead members are looking at in terms of performance report, to be assured that we are sort of being rigorous with ourselves, particularly if we're, as we try and embed and change our culture. How are we testing that we're doing that? And are we looking at it rigorously and regularly? So I think, just in summary, those were our 4 main recommendations about things that you should consider when drafting a response, which I know we'll all then get a chance to debate at the council meeting. So we'll get a chance to look at it again. But those were our wish lists, really, for inclusion.
Thank you. We'll make sure that they are included. Thank you very much. Those comments too. Now, in terms of the committee and their comments on this report, obviously we've had a big comprehensive we've from OSC and from Housing Scrutiny, and we can feel from residents who bothered to come here this evening that how really important this is. So over to you now. Catherine.
Well, first, I want to thank the residents very much for coming tonight, and we can really feel how strong your pain is. So thank you for speaking to us about that. And also, I wanted to thank Sam and Joe for putting together the summary for the council to look at, because it's really important that here in the council we absolutely take on board and accept, as Elizabeth has very loudly, all the things that it says. But tonight I just wanted really, actually, as Maxine mentioned, to reflect how I felt reading this paper as one of the few of us councillors who were actually there on the day and witnessed it. And you know, it still makes the hair on my neck stand up reading this, because it's so shocking to see how we failed our communities on that day. And you know, I as you can see, I still find it really upsetting as us councillors on the ground couldn't do more to support the immediate community there and then, and how we failed. And I think it's really I just want to pick up actually on the point that Mary just made about it was feeling completely impotent of not having the information to our hands. So we wanted to help people, but we didn't know who were in the tower. We didn't know where they'd gone. We didn't know what centre they were in. And we were just sort of trying to handle a situation that was so out of control by the time we got there, that we felt really impotent in our help. And I still feel that impotence so strongly that we couldn't do more immediately then on that day to help people. But I want to, while I'm making that reflection, to also reflect how extraordinary the voluntary sector were and the whole community were, that turning up on that day already, you know, Rugby Portobello, Clement James, St Francis Church, St John's Church, the community had supplied them all with water, with food, with mattresses, with towels, with all sorts of products. And it was just extraordinary, the community immediate and really early reaction. And as it's pointed out in the paper, the council was just far too slow and far too late in their response, and that we did lose control because we haven't responded quickly enough. So I just really want to acknowledge that I really witnessed, and I think it's been captured so powerfully here in how we failed in that. I want to thank the community for being so amazing on that day, and how they have continued to be so incredible and supportive of our community. And I just want to also say that this approach to data and information, and how we centralise information so that, God forbid, anything ever as absolutely awful as this happens again, we are so much better prepared as to where we go and how we centralise everything to be able to respond better. Thank you.
All right, Jen.
Thank you, and thank you, Catherine, and everyone that came tonight. My question, I suppose, is perhaps more for Maxine than anyone. Obviously, building control was a huge factor in what happened on the night, but also in how we're going to respond and what we can do better going forwards. In the lines of inquiry that we've identified, there's obviously an awful lot around measuring progress, tracking change, making sure that we are calling for improvements in the wider system. But building control is one of those things which is a very specialist skill that people are trained in. They have to go through very rigorous checks and education to become qualified. It's obviously good that our teams are now fully given that they have the training that's required, but the certification, that's what they have the certification. But we as lay people will not be able to understand exactly the skills that are required. So how can we make sure as a council, and London really, or the country at large, that we're actually checking each other to make sure that other councils are getting it right, so that we're not marking our own homework, I suppose, is the question I'm asking. How can we be assured that we do that? less building control.
Thank you, James. I'll respond to that. I think so, that question about kind of what, not marking our own homework and who else can form a view of what we're doing is one that runs across a lot of the themes from this report, not just building control. And building control specifically, it is an area where there's been a lot of change both here and also nationally. So just in the last few months, a new regime has come in, which is a direct result of the Grenfell tragedy, which is part of the implementation of the Building Safety Act. It requires building control professionals to be qualified and certified to a certain level, as you referred to. And that qualification certification actually is a big part of the assurance, because there are different levels of qualification, and I know that our team are going through those levels at the moment, and really we want as many surveyors at level 3 as you can possibly have. I know that other authorities are finding it difficult to get people qualified to that level. The other things I think are about really good management around the size of the workloads, the number of cases that individual officers have, the management oversight, a number of the things that are all highlighted in this report that we've known for some time and so have been working on. There is also an accreditation. The heads of building control come together across London, and our head of building control is a really active member of that. And I think that is, the opportunity there for some sort of peer review and challenge is definitely there. If you've read the other parts of the report, the inquiry report, you'll see that actually the accreditation bodies come in for criticism as well. So local authority building control, which is has also got things to learn from here. So I think that will be a work in progress to see what they do as a response to this.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. So, we're being asked to consider this report, and I've read it over and over again, and acknowledge what Catherine has said about the day, and the thanks that I give to the people who are there. But the bit that strikes the residents is really, for me, I just want to talk about chapter 4, which is all about the relationship that we had with the TMO. And I looked at that and I thought to myself, this shouldn't be about the relationship with the TMO. It should be about what relationship we have with the tenants. And that's where the big problem was. And I cannot conceive now ever being involved with managing homes without having that direct relationship with tenants. Because it just doesn't work. I remember as a new councillor, when I had casework, I was going through the TMO and then they were coming back, and how wrong that was. And I remember, again, talking to people, and it comes out, and I know it's referencing to Eddie, about people just giving up complaining because they were just wasting their time. And in the end, it was impacting on their health and well-being, the fact that they were just constantly getting no replies at all. And so when I read that, it just makes me feel ashamed. I also think, Samia, that, those early days, I remember going to the TMO AGM, which I'm sure you were at, and sitting on the stage with Doug.
A horror show.
And it was delayed because they were still finishing their supper downstairs, which showed the contempt, I think, as far as the council, I will call it council, had. And that does make me feel very, very ashamed. I remember the distrust of when we took that housing back, because everybody said, well, you're never going to be able to do that. And it was a challenge. And we took it back with the TMO telling us that they had a 93% resident approval rating on repairs. And, Doug, we organised the first independent one. I think it was 31%. We're now 62%, which, even though you can say, well, it's top quartile London, it's still only 62%. So, when we talk about being the best culture, having, the best council, we've still got a long way to go. And I think, we have to acknowledge that. And I think what I would also like to just end up on is when we talk about culture of the council, it sort of it irritates me when we talk about culture of the council, because what we're talking about is culture of us. And what the culture is just being a decent human being, somebody who cares. And I think to the the point that you've made is somebody that recognises that we work for the residents. And that's all you have to do. And it just really ticks me off when somebody doesn't do that and somebody says something as crass as you just organise Christmas parties, because it does immense damage to us as a council. And I can only apologise. Anyway, thank you.
That wasn't the council, that's an individual that is causing a lot of.
When somebody says that, anyway.
Meeting in public, put it that way.
But again, just thank you for coming.
Are there any other comments? I know that actually.
Yeah, can I make a sort of quick comment?
Yes, of course you can.
Claire was mentioning, she mentioned earlier about data, because I've seen it for the years, because the data with the council is a shambles. It's all over the place. I'm not sure about now, but for last years, it's unbelievable, because there is no like a call, like a registration, for example, if the resident call. Now, yeah, it's been added and stuff. But what we're talking about before, I'm not sure exactly how the future plan for making sure that when the resident call or there's a complaint, has to be like put in on the kind of folder for people to see.
Yeah.
And well, probably I gather you have a meeting, KPI meeting every month, whatever, to discuss major things like, for example, from repairs, whatever. Then probably you have the chance to discuss this kind of matter with the residents. Why they complaining about? Was their problem? At least something just to reflect and go back to the residents. Yeah, we came up with this. We're trying to help you. At least to give that kind of like a feeling that the council is working with us, not for us. It's working with us. At least it's helping us.
Yeah.
Not like before. Before you don't get any reply whatsoever.
Soft. Whether you want.
Yeah. Gosh, there's been so much tonight. You bring up something about data. I just want to answer that, because actually just today I was questioning our repairs team about which are the top repairs that we keep getting, the repeat type of repairs. So we want to get more information on that, because again, so at the Housing and Scrutiny Committee, we had a big discussion before we actually got this report. So still so much came up before we even got this report. So it was really helpful to see the recommendations and the summary. So thank you, Claire. And then again, we had something at TCC, Tenants Consultative Committee, which is a committee we have for our council RAs. So that's where we do encourage everyone to please come to that. And we have lots and lots of discussions every month. And again, this report didn't come to that because we had the meeting beforehand, but we talked about the engagement plan. And so we've got quite a lot of things. And again, repairs came up in that even before this report. So this is, as you say, quite a repeat incidents that we're really looking into, and we are responding. So we've already responded, but more in depth.
Who can come to the Tenants Consultative Committee?
Anybody? It's a public meeting. Anybody can come. The invitation specifically about if we're doing any votes, you can only vote if you are from an RA on a council estate, and we have them from all across the borough. We have leaseholders and we have non-leaseholders. We have tenants. So and we get. I mean, Doug's.
Well, I don't know if that's of any interest to the gentleman here. Would that be of interest for you to know where these meetings are, or to come along occasionally? Why don't we try and get the information?
Yeah, we'll share.
If you could leave your name, or maybe Claire.
Well, I'm meeting with Hanan, I think next week or week after, aren't we? And see. Okay, great. And I just want to touch something on data, because so I'm sitting here with my housing hat on. I've been a lead member for housing for a year, but I mean, I know Claire knows, but I became a councillor because I was involved in the relief effort as a volunteer at Portobello in the aftermath of the fire. And I was there very early in the morning, and there were lists of who was there, but unfortunately, as you say, they were not correct.
I was contacted by the police that I was presumed dead.
Oh.
And I called the next day, and I called the phone number that was presented, and I presented my name, date of birth, the address and everything. Then within a week, I received texts and a phone call from that I was presumed dead. I was shocked.
No.
That's
It
what
was
we're talking about.
shocking.
Data is like this.
So as a volunteer, I was there and I saw we had these lists, and then very quickly, because we were talking to residents, and they were saying, that's not right, they're not there, they don't live there, they don't live there. So we got out of the cupboard in Rugby Portobello, we got out these big sheets of paper, and we wrote everyone down in the community.
I think what we're saying,
We need, but now
what you're
know
bringing
more
up
about
is
data.
what's in the report, which is all about resilience and what happened in the aftermath. And thank you for bringing that, because that is something which is in the inquiry and that we do need to respond to in our formal response. So thank you for that.
So
And
can I
to
just
Catherine's
ask
point too,
a second?
can I just finish my sentence?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Because resilience is something where we do believe that we have changed, that we've got a permanent team here, that we're well knitted into what's happening in London. To go back to Maxine's point, like building control, it's about training, about having connections and contacts within the voluntary sector. So there's all sorts of things that we've done, but it is something that we really do need to address in our report. Now, Sammy, one more word to you, and then I'm going to ask my
very
committee.
quickly, because it's also hard for us to be here. You can't imagine how hard it is to be here, and we're holding ourselves. And what you don't see is what happens when we leave the room. So I'll be very quick. Talking about data, Clemens James had the list of flat 1 to flat 45 Barwin House and names waiting to evacuate us, and it took 3 weeks for someone to knock up on our doors. My concerns about resilience and the voluntary sector is that if there's an emergency tomorrow, I know where Hanan is, I know where the lady with cancer needs to build a house is, they know where we are. We won't be waiting for you because we are not connected into your plan. That's my concern. If there's another tragedy, we're not connected into your emergency.
Let me get Maxine to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you, Savio. It's a really important point, and I don't think we can't go over it enough. Actually, so things have changed a lot since that time, in terms of how we collect data in the event of an emergency, both in terms of having much more up-to-date information about tenants and leaseholders in our homes, and our ability to access that information, out of hours in an emergency, and Doug's on the back row there, and as his team have done a lot of work to be able to get that. And obviously as well, it's our direct information about our tenants now, not via a third party organisation like a TMO. Then there's also the when we had an evacuation from a fire at Emperor's Gate a few months ago, you're also in a situation where you've got to work well, communicate really well with the other emergency services. So the police in that instance, Emperor's Gate, were starting to compile a list. And it's so key that you bring it together with, with the list, that any list that our arrest centre is doing. So there's a lot to learn from that. We do have within our resilience team, guys called Donne, who works with arrest centres. And if not met them, Sammy, I think it might be great if we did that and think about how we connect up with the RAs as well as the rest centres, because I'm sure there's more we should do.
Thank you. Josh.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and again, thank you to everyone who came this evening. I think it's been really harrowing to hear, even 7 years later, that you don't feel that things have changed or that you've been listened to, and that's really, really disappointing to hear from the council perspective, because it shouldn't be like that. And all I can say is we've got all the right people in the room to take that forward. And thank you so much for coming. I know we're coming out in the evening sometimes, especially getting to winter months. It's not always easy for some people. So thank you for all those who come and said. I really appreciate it. For the report in and of itself, I think it's really, again, harrowing reading what the report uncovered in terms of not just the TMOs Kim mentioned, but the council recovery post-fire. I think it really puts into a frame that a public organisation that is purposely established to serve residents in a public way, completely closed in on itself. And in some parts, like the TMO tries to protect its own interests rather than the interests of everyone else. I think it's really horrible to read, and I think all these people who experienced it as well can speak to it firsthand. And this really puts a shining light to it, and how much we need to really tackle these issues and ensure that the trust is rebuilt. I think that's the main issue, one of trust as well. But kind of my interest in that, in terms of that, Joe, I should say, in terms of public meetings that have been ongoing that will upcoming in the next few weeks. How are we going to collate all the information, all the views from residents about what the council can do in its final report, and how will the council in itself how will come up with that draft effectively? I know the inquiry report in and of itself didn't have specific recommendations for RBPC, but we need to have our own change in order to note that in that respect. So what's kind of the process, just for either everyone in the room and the leadership team as well, to get to that point?
So thank you, Councillor Endell. So far we've had 3 drop-in sessions. What we've been doing is keeping track of, so some people have come with specific casework issues, some people have come with feedback on the inquiry report or on the council's response, and we're keeping track of all that feedback. And as part of the final response presented to the leadership team, and indeed the response presented to the community in those early November meetings, we'll be presenting back some of that feedback so they'll see where that's come from. The second question is more about, and as I understood, it's more about the kind of form of our response. And what we're doing at the moment is looking at other examples of public authorities who have responded successfully, responded to public inquiries or investigations of that kind. But I think that's another area where we need to talk to the community about what form the response should take, what will be meaningful, and how we consider the full range of recommendations, as you say, none of which are addressed directly for the council, but most of which will have implications for us in some way or another. And obviously we're waiting for the government committed to a response, I think, within 6 months. Some of the changes, some of the recommendations are at a national level, and those will have an impact on how we respond as a council. But I think we've been clear that we won't wait for those national changes, but that we will start that conversation now and prepare a response for November, which will set out specifically what we've been doing.
Any other comments, questions, Sarah? So thank you very much for coming. I know it's really been a very difficult journey for you, and it's ongoing, so we really appreciate hearing from you. I think for me, the report has really highlighted how we failed you and how you felt about it, and I'm truly sorry for that. But one of the things that's really clear is that we didn't understand our communities and their cultural and religious and other social needs. And Hannah, I owe you a big apology. You came to the Westgate, you had a child in a buggy and you were pregnant, and I offered you water and it was Ramadan, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I'm really sorry. So, we've got a lot to learn.
If there aren't any other comments or questions from other people who have very kindly come here this evening, I think, could we please look at the recommendation in paragraph 2, and we recommend to consider the attached report we have, including the findings and the next steps. So thank you very much. We now turn to the next item on the agenda, which is the housing management framework, our safety wells. Thank you very much. We've considered there's 1 page of a confidential report which we have already discussed, so we don't need to go into the session. So Doug and Dan.
Yeah, just very briefly, as it says, it's pretty clear that this is a framework. This is framework number 3, and it has an envelope of up to 90 million. And because we are rightly prioritising safety, particularly, obviously, as it says, fire safety here, and the Bradford tragedy shows the importance of this and the terrible consequences when it is not prioritised. And this process, the point about the process, Doug and Dan will talk about it more, but the point about this process is
just need rules to get too much.
Why don't we just pause for a minute while we let you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's come in.
Thank you. And this process provides us with a short list of approved contractors. So then when we need to act, we can act very quickly, which is very important. So anything else on
this is actually, sorry, it's the fourth part of it. It's the fourth and final.
Fourth and the last one.
We have mechanical and electrical, the external fabrication and the Dutch consultants framework. This is the last part of this.
It's called Framework 3.
It is definitely. I'm sorry, we did a consultancy one, which is called Framework 4 beforehand, so I do apologise. So it's for 4 years initially, with the ability to extend to. Its value is 90 million. We're not going to spend 90 million, but it's up to that level. There's no guaranteed spend with any of the contractors, but what we are saying that call off, so whenever we're going to use it, there will be a mini competition. But because we use this usually in times when we need to do it, if we discover something, we might do something quickly. The recommendation also suggests that that gets approved by the executive director rather than come to full leadership.
But always, any decision I take, I'll do it in consultation with
I think it's pretty clear. I mean, this council is absolutely committed to that. We have to have safe, secure, decent homes, and fire safety is really fundamental for that. So I would recommend to the leadership team that we accept recommendations in paragraph 2, unless they have any further comments. I thought the report was pretty clear and comprehensive. Does anyone have anything that they wish to add or any questions they'd like to ask? No, could we please accept the recommendations that we please in paragraph 2? Thank you very much. Thanks. And now we come to 41 revenue and capital financial monitoring and the report. So the report for the first quarter of this year. Johnny?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Mike and the team for preparing this report. I think we're working in a totally different financial environment from even a couple of years ago. When I first came onto the leadership team, budgets were, of course, challenging, but they're much more so now. And I think a projected overspend of 150,000 against a total revenue budget of nearly 214 million represents a good performance, particularly in the context of some of the challenges the sector is facing. If we set this in that context of kind of how other London boroughs are performing, we're seeing that there are 15, 20, and sometimes even more £1 million of overspend being projected. So I think that's a testament to a lot of the good work that happens here. That things are tough, and so the biggest budget pressure is still in temporary accommodation, where we're more than £4 million overspent, despite some excellent prevention work that I know is happening, and all of the work that's happening across the council to try and find safe, decent, secure homes within the budgets that we have available. There are also pressures in resources in my area. Part of that's to do with facilities management, which is slightly more undecided, I suppose, but also in digital, which is a relatively new service area for the council. And it's still, I think, in a process of right-sizing itself. There are challenges in doing that, and I think there's a long way to go to get that service quite right. But just before I hand over, I think it's worth reflecting on some of the good things in this report. So adults and children's really complex, demand-led services, which in lots of other areas are being overspent, here are pretty much in balance.
which is a really good performance. And likewise, the £3.2 million overachievement of income from parking. Of course, we don't ever set parking policy with a goal of generating income, but in the context of a monitoring report, it is welcome that it is available to smooth some of the pressures that we're talking about. So I think we should feel, I think this is a good performance that should give us heart and kind of courage to face the difficult challenges ahead. But we mustn't be complacent, because in particular temporary accommodation it seems a sustained and quite intense problem for local authorities across the city.
Yes, I think you've seen that in a lot of newspaper reports recently, and certainly, London Council would say, one child in every primary school classroom is in temporary accommodation. 1 in 50 people in London is in temporary accommodation. The pressures are absolutely huge. And Soph, you might like to comment on
Well, I yes, as temporary accommodation comes under me, I feel responsible for this extra 3 million in the budget. But as Johnny says and Elizabeth says, it is absolutely London wide, and I would actually like to praise our team, because presentations of homelessness has been on the presentations has increased by 32%. But
I see
our
presentations.
preventions, we have more or less kept it the same, and in fact it's slightly come down. So the numbers of homeless people have slightly come down, but the cost of housing every single homeless household has increased, as we know. So that is the rise in this. But another part of our team, we made it a real focus earlier in the year. We had over 100 households in hotels, which is not a good outcome for households. There's no good facilities, incredibly expensive. So we've now got that down to only 4 households in hotels, which is, we are pretty much the only borough, I think, in London is managing to go this way. We believe our hotels should be for our businesses and our tourists, and not for people when it's not a good outcome for them. But the rise, as Johnny knows only too well, is because the cost of the accommodation is so expensive in the private sector, and the landlords are fleeing the sector. And so we're all councils are going up after a very, very small number of private rented landlords to house our tenants. So it's something that it is across London.
And it's just the reality, we need to just set that in our budgets.
So Johnny, we seem to be spending all our reserves and contingencies. Is there a science to this in terms of what we should be holding as as a guide to given our, if there was a ratio to expenditure or whatever it was? I just wondered if there's any science to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hand over to Mike in a minute. I think councils should have an operating reserves balance of at least £10 million. I think from where we are today, if we were at £10 million, we would think that's quite concerning. So the kind of minimum levels that you might need in a local authority are much lower than where we are. In terms of contingency, I suppose, I don't think there's a kind of set level at which it has to be. There's a level at which we've had it. And over the past couple of years, at different times, we've had a contingency reserve and a kind of contingency budget. And I suppose the aspiration is always to not spend all of it. And the fact that it seems as though we're likely to is another kind of amber indicator in terms of the growing financial challenges we've got. Is there anything you add to that?
I mean, really, I think the expenditure on contingency and reserves is more than we'd like it to be, but obviously we hold those contingencies and reserves for that reason. So in a sense, they're doing what they're set up to do. It's sure a few years ago we used to say contingency and use very little of it. Yeah. So it is an indication that there is a lot more pressure on budgets, and we need to manage within that. Some of the reserves were set up for the reasons that they're being used, so they have declined for that reason. Obviously, the Grenfell Reserve was set up specifically for that reason, and there have been other pressures, such as the new ERP system, which historically has been done by those sort of things have been done from capital, and now you can't because of changes in the regulations, accounting regulations, and the nature of the system. So there is indeed a fair amount of pressure on those as well. But I think as Johnny said, we've still got the 10 million and have no plans to touch that, and are nowhere near that. And we have got other reserves on top, which are still sort of in the middle of where most London authorities are. So I think we're still quite a way above 10 million. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, you commented on the children's services revenue, and I would really congratulate all the officers for such an amazing outcome.
Yes.
Which is, really extraordinary given the pressures that are outlined in 15.4 and 15.5, but also to flag, of course, these pressures haven't gone away and actually are increasing. As we know, we're having more children in need assessments. Our number of looked after children are increasing. We have more unaccompanied asylum seeking children coming, and we have more former unaccompanied asylum seeking care leavers who still haven't managed to get recourse to public funds, and therefore we're having to cover those costs. So these are just the beginning of pressures, which unfortunately we think will only get worse in the years to come. So thank you for what you've achieved in this quarter, but it's going to get harder.
This is
lurking at the back. We just had a couple of observations on the one was obviously acknowledging the huge burden of the temporary accommodation overspend, but just reflecting on what that budget ought to look like next year, and whether we ought to be taking more of it on the chin in the budget, or making a larger provision next year, because it doesn't look like it's a problem that's going away. And then a recommendation was made at the meeting. I think there's a feeling about transformation, that we'd really like to see more evidence of the transformation going on, the new approach, not the salami slicing. And Johnny agreed that some reflections in the next budget monitoring reports going forward would reflect, give us some information about what, and reassurance really that that transformation was going on and what effect it was having.
I think that on something that's incredibly sensible, actually. Thank you. Johnny, I don't think there's anything.
Well, these are comments that were put at the OSC, and I responded there, but I suppose in terms of temporary accommodation, that there will be growth, I think, in the budget next year. And the process we need to go through is looking at the numbers and kind of where it's heading, and therefore what the need and the overspend is likely to be, and then kind of, I think, make a judgment call about to what extent we should be providing for that through the budget, and to what extent we can do more to kind of reduce the overspend and try and smooth it in other ways. So I think that's a conversation we're likely to have over the coming months, and there are options that I know Housing and Social Investment are looking at that might be able to help with that. In terms of transformation, I said to Will at the meeting, I'm very happy to have a passage on that in the commentary. And I think one of the ways in which that will help is that up to now we probably have been transforming services, but we haven't really been describing it in that way.
Yes.
So it isn't that. So yes, there is a kind of a new emphasis on transformation, but I don't think we're going from 0 to 100. I think it's something that has been taking place. And sometimes when you see on a table, reduce a team by 1 FTE, that looks like a salami slice, but if in fact it's because you've introduced a new digital system, for example, that is in its own way a transformation of how a service is being delivered. So yeah, it's a sensible point and something we can include, and something that I think maybe we could have been cannier about kind of remarking upon previously.
Yeah, you're blowing your trumpet a bit louder.
Yeah, well, modesty is my sin, and happy.
It took the OSC to persuade you that.
Exactly.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or can we please accept the recommendations in paragraph 2? Thank you. Right, that is the end of the meeting. Unless there's any other business. Good. Thank you all very much. I know I don't know.
Very smart. Oh, they're gold.
I think it's the same as the.
Oh.